Welcome back to Kings of Columbus on the podcast. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis, and we'll be joined in the second half of the show by Austin Ward and Jeremy Birmingham. And then at the end, Bill and I will come back and do Whatcha Watchin, Whatcha Eatin, Whatcha Thinkin. But we are starting, Landis, with something that I've been doing to preview the season for the last couple of years. I really like it. We have to figure out what we're going to call it, but it's basically the guy on Ohio State's team that you believe is going to exceed expectations. And to me, this is, if it's a player that everyone thinks is great, you think he's going to have an all-time season. Mm-hmm. If you think a player's good, he's good, he's a good starter, you think, this guy's an All-American. If you think he's, most people think, he's fine, you think he's going to be really good. If it's a guy who's basically done nothing that no one's talking about and you think he's going to make an impact, it's just a level above, Landis, that you're sort of staking your claim on. I believe in this dude. Do we understand the concept?
We understand the concept. I think we don't go full bore into this when we do the stock watch on the podcast daily. We did it throughout camp. We'll do it occasionally throughout the season, where we try to hit on a handful of guys when we talk about that. And I think this is kind of taking that idea, sort of picking one guy, and really going full bore into why you think that this guy is your guy, why you think this guy is going to be something greater than whatever the expectation is.
Staking your career on it.
That's right.
Right? Let's just say of the four of us, whoever's the most wrong has to quit.
I like it. I like stakes.
Because I will say, we did this on Buckeye. We've done this on Buckeye Talk the last couple of years. We did it last year, and I had the worst one. And I'm not there anymore. So I felt like I had to leave. It's like a loser leave town kind of situation. And so here I am doing it here.
So what is your track record with this?
Terrible. I can't. All I can remember is that last year was Court Williams for me. And it's like, it's not his fault. It's not my fault. It's just circumstance. It's terrible. His injury luck, and he has it again this year. But I have a bad memory. I'm going to guess I'm pretty bad at this, which also I feel bad about the person we're about to talk about, because perhaps I am jinxing him. But I wanted to claim this guy as a going to exceed expectations Buckeye from the first time we watched him in a full practice in the spring. And I am not alone. You don't have to be alone here, but you have to go a little bit above and beyond. So I am taking second-year defensive end Kenyatta Jackson, and I think he is going to lead Ohio State in sacks, and I will go double-digit sacks for Kenyatta Jackson this year, which is, I think a lot of people think this guy maybe has a good year in front of him. But when you think about JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer as older guys, Caden Curry is a guy in his class. When Jim Knowles talked about the defensive ends recently, he talked about those four guys and the depth at defensive end. I think when it comes specifically to rushing the passer, he will be a cut above, and I think he'll be the best pass rusher we've seen at Ohio State since Chase Young left.
But a gap, right, between, but he is not Chase Young, just the best since him. I want to make sure people.
Wait, it's not your guy. Don't go going around saying my guy's not Chase. Maybe he is Chase Young. Actually, Chase Young's not the comparison that I use for him. I'm not saying this is the comparison I've used for him before, and I'm not saying he's him. Kenyatta Jackson is listed at 6'5", 258. Going into year two here. All I'm saying is that Myles Garrett at Texas A&M was listed at 6'5", 262 going into his sophomore year. That's the guy that he reminds me of, which is ridiculous, but it's mostly body type, explosion off the line, speed rush, bend, spin move. So, I don't know how much power we'll see from him. Not that he doesn't have it, but I think the speed and the bend on the edge is extraordinary. And it's just because my point of references are limited. I've watched Ohio State players in practice, and then when I was doing Brown stuff, I've watched Browns players practice. And I've had years where I've been very intent on watching the Browns. And the comparison for me is Myles Garrett, stylistically, more than do I think Kenyatta Jackson's going to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. But I'm also not saying he's not going to be the number one pick in the NFL draft.
I mean, there's a lot of time between now and when he is draft eligible. I suppose that is on the table. Those are big time names you're throwing out there. I'm with you on. I think he's going to lead the team in sacks. I'm with you on the short list of players you think is going to make like a monster jump this year and become a real dude. I think that he's on it, or at least I'm drinking that Kool-Aid for sure. It's a lot of expectation we're putting out there on a guy who basically didn't play it all last year. And if you watch his high school tape, which is basically all we have to go on other than like kind of just watching him move around in practice, which is something, but it's not everything. I do think you need to see more than what you saw from high school. Like, he was an excellent high school player, but he was like also pretty physically dominant in high school. Like, he was just faster than everybody else on the field. It was like, one step, see you later. I don't have to do much to get to the quarterback. It is now a more nuanced discussion, I think, with Kenyatta Jackson, and especially if we're talking about a guy who's going to get to double-digit sacks. Like, he would have needed to put in a lot of work with Larry Johnson and enhancing that toolbox that Larry Johnson talks about, and developing moves and counter moves and hand fighting and all that stuff. And it can't just be pure speed. But I'm with you, I think, on the idea that he's going to develop enough of that this year to make an impact.
He had 17 sacks in 11 games his senior year of high school in Florida. The second practice that we watched in August, which was a chunk of the way into practice, just some individual pass rush drills. That's where he was. Yeah, I know you need a toolbox, but if your first two tools are beat you off the line, beat you around the edge, and then if you as a tackle start to overcompensate from that, I'm going to spin move you inside. That's a pretty good two-pitch arsenal, and I think that might get him a long way, especially in a world where I don't think teams are going to be gearing to stop Kenyatta Jackson, not when JT Tuimoloau or Jack Sawyer and Mike Hall inside and other guys on this defensive line are also going to be a problem. I think that's part of it, too, that he may wind up in situations where a decent chunk of the time he's one-on-one against guys who cannot handle his athleticism.
Yeah, they're not going to overload to him to start the year. They're going to make him prove it first. So what do you think of? Because Birm like sort of threw this idea out there of like it's Jack and JT on one side and Kenyatta on the other side is more of like a speed complement to the power of those two guys. How are you envisioning, I guess, that kind of workload playing itself out and usage?
Well, let me answer your question with the question. What have you thought of the way that Jim Knowles and Ryan Day and Larry Johnson have talked about this? Because has it felt like it's more like a three-headed monster at defensive end with JT, Jack, and Kenyatta, and not as much like, hey, there's two veteran third-year 5-stars, and then we have some young guys? Like, should we? Because one of the things you have to have with a guy is he's got to play. But we're thinking, so I like where Birm's head is with like specifics of it. But the first thing has to be is, do we think he's going to play a lot the way the coaches are talking about him?
It's hard for me to give you, I think, a confident answer on that, because like when Ryan Day and Jim Knowles talk about him, I do feel like it's JT, Jack, and Kenyatta. I don't know that I felt the same vibe from Larry Johnson when we talked to him, and for what we know of how they handle personnel, like it's ultimately up to Larry Johnson, I think. How much Kenyatta Jackson plays. I think it's very clear that Ryan Day is fairly enamored with what Kenyatta Jackson can become and perhaps already is. And I think the same is true with Jim Knowles. And I think part of the thing with Larry Johnson is he does not want to put too much out there about anybody too early, whether that's undue expectations or trying to keep a fire lit under a guy. I'm not sure, but Larry has handled that differently, just sort of publicly talking about guys in the past and with Kenyatta than I think some other people who weren't as close to the position group have. So that makes it a little more difficult for me to guess, I get how much Kenyatta might play. But I am operating under the assumption that it is a three-headed attack there, more so than it is the two veteran guys, and then we'll throw this younger guy out there when we can.
I was looking at the pass rush productivity grade from PFF, which takes into account hurries and sacks and everything, and it's the percentages compared to your overall number of pass rush snaps. So going back to 2014, and again, some of these, I don't buy the numbers exactly because year to year, it's like, man, it feels like there's a different person doing the grades because I don't know, like this person's at 20% and this person was at 14% the year before, but I'm trying to get a vague idea, right? So I do think you can compare year to year. And among defensive ends who played like at least half their team snaps in 2014, Joey Bosa was 6th in the nation in pass rush productivity. In 2015, Joey Bosa was 1st. In 2016, Tyquan Lewis was 5th. In 2017, Nick Bosa was 1st. In 2018, Chase Young was 11th. In 2019, Chase Young was 1st. In 2020, among the guys who played half the snaps, Jonathan Cooper was 9th, which surprised me a little bit. But they haven't had somebody in the top 15 the last 2 years. So that's one thing. I think the pass rush productivity of individual Ohio State players, the guys who were on the field a lot, has not been as high. And then if you try to set a threshold, and I set it at 16 or better, that like on 16% of your pass rush snaps, you're getting a pressure. The 4 Ohio State players who have done that since 2014 are Joey Bosa in 15, Tyquan Lewis in 16, Nick Bosa in 17, and Chase Young in 19. So that's like special, right? I think he's above 16. Like that's the threshold I'm talking about. I think he is going to be a regular problem. Now, I feel like the discussion around the Ohio State pass rush the past couple of years has been, well, sometimes they get some pressure, but they don't get home. So it's pressure's good. You got to get home. I think one-on-one matchups, other good guys on the defensive line, playing enough and then being deployed at the most opportune circumstances, destroying people on third down, that kind of thing. And by the way, Ohio State's playing some teams that are going to throw it. Like they're going to actually have a chance to get after the passer against Sam Hartman in Notre Dame, against Tanner Mordecai in Wisconsin, against Drew Aller in Penn State, against J.J. McCarthy, and against Austin Reed in Western Kentucky in week 3. So I do think there's going to be plenty of opportunity. I think I'll have good players around him, so there's not an entire offense gearing to stop him. And I think he will have absolutely spectacular splash plays. So I was so excited. I didn't want anyone else to take Kenyatta Jackson away from me.
I think my comparison for him, which I view as much more realistic than yours, not to say he won't get to where yours is, but I'm just, I'm trying to do the kid a favor.
You're saying, so you're going a scooch below Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
Just a scooch. Okay.
And it's like it's a twist on a comparison, I guess, because when I looked at Kenyatta in high school, I felt like I saw like Zach Harrison a little bit. Just like purely like long levered, physically dominant compared to everyone else he was on the field with, and got by not having to do much. But then now that I've seen him at Ohio State and like watched him in some of the pass rush stuff we got to watch in practice, both in the spring and a little bit we got to watch this summer, I think he is a more like fluid version of Zach Harrison. Like Zach Harrison, I think turned out to be like a very good straight line athlete and very fast for his size, but never really developed like that flexibility and bend that we're talking about to take his pass rush to the next level. And I do think that Kenyatta has added some of that to his game already in the time that he's been at Ohio State and will continue to do so in the future. So like people who were frustrated is probably the right word with the lack of sack production for a guy like Zach Harrison. I think that is explained in just sort of the athlete that he is. I think Kenyatta can be a improved version of that. Does that make sense to you?
Bendier. I think he's significantly bendier than Zach Harrison, but like long limb, physical, maybe just overmatching people in high school, which is why he played 24 defensive snaps last year and he didn't play after the Rutgers game on defense. Like he needed a year to develop. Now Zach Harrison got thrown in there as a true freshman and actually probably needed a year to develop that he didn't get. I also think that's part of this too, that he was in the lab for a year. And one of the things they said in the spring was that Kenyatta Jackson, like after practice last year when he was a true freshman, would sit down and talk about pass rush moves with Paris Johnson. And that's when my alarm bells went off too. Cause it's like, you look at the athlete and then you're like, this guy is like grinding the mental side of the game with a top 10 NFL draft pick at tackle. Like, give me all of that. So I actually think I think maybe Zach never got to develop because he played for 4 years, but they just let Kenyatta Jackson sort of in silence get himself ready. 24 defensive snaps. That's nothing. And I think he's ready for something big. Okay, we'll see if yours is as good. Austin and Birm around the corner. Quick break. We'll be back with the guy Landis is banking on next on Kings of Columbus. All right, back on Kings of Columbus. You might have thought he's going Jesse Mirko. He's not. Landis, who's your guy?
Yeah, so there's two memes with me, right? There's punter and offensive line. I'm gonna lean into the latter. I'm going with Josh Fryar, and there probably have been times in the past where I've talked about him on our, various iterations of talking about things on the podcast channel, where it has seemed like maybe I'm down on Josh Fryar, and that was never really the case. That the thing that I was concerned about was I thought I saw the real flash with Josh Fryar last year at right tackle. And then when Ohio State said, we're going to throw him at left tackle now in the spring and let him work there and kind of see how it looks. I didn't love the idea of kind of what I viewed as maybe like stunting the growth of what I thought was going to be a pretty good impact right tackle for Ohio State this season. And now that we've reached the point where he's going to be the starting right tackle, and I think is just more comfortable there. It's body mechanics, spring chemistry. I don't know. Some guys are better on one side than the other. Some guys can handle both. And I believe Josh when he says he got to the point where he felt like he was starting to get comfortable on both sides. I still think from everything we've seen that he's a better right tackle than he is a left tackle. So now that he's back there in a position that I feel is more natural to him, he is a guy that I'm definitely banking on to, I think, be better than people are expecting this year. The sample size is not tremendously large. He's played fewer than 400 snaps. He has one start at right tackle. He's played inside as well. So like I understand the skepticism, I suppose, but I really felt like I saw something last year when they played him in that start against Indiana. And you want to tell me that Indiana stinks? Like I hear you. Like I understand that it wasn't the best defense Ohio State played last year that he was going against. But I also thought there was an opportunity for him to look quite bad in his first start against Indiana, and he didn't. He looked like he was a natural there, and he looked comfortable stepping up into that spotlight. And then I thought there were moments against Michigan too, where he looked pretty comfortable stepping in as a right guard. Not as consistent as the right tackle work against Indiana, but bright spots that were enough for me to think that he's got something to him. So, like, what does that look like this year? Probably not like first team all Big Ten, because there are other good tackles in the Big Ten and more household names. But I think he's a guy that could play at the level that gets him like second team all Big Ten consideration and sets him up for a guy who returns in 2024 as someone who's viewed as one of the better offensive tackles in the conference.
So there have been certainly success stories at Ohio State of underrated offensive linemen in recruiting who turned into great offensive line. Like Pat Elflein might be the most obvious example. I don't think we have to judge this based on, all Big Ten, because people are terrible at voting. And so I think we can just judge it by you. I think we'll let you be the judge of your own choice. And I think fans can watch it and be like, were there plays where they thought to themselves in the game, oh, I don't know, that Josh got beat on that? Or are they not even noticing him, which means he's doing his job? Or there are moments where he is road grading somebody in the run game, or really handling his business on an island in a pass rush situation. And I think we'll know it when we see it, Landis, more than anything else, because I don't expect the world. If he's really good, I think the world's going to be more like me, which is like, well, he was a low recruit. I don't know. And they won't catch up to the Landis line of thinking in time to give him an award.
Yeah.
But I think like if right tackle is a non-issue, I think you win. I think we will acknowledge your choice.
Yeah, I think and that seems fair to me. Lower the bar for me to be right, please. That sounds great.
We did say a name for 12 games. Landis is a genius.
Yeah, I do think Josh will probably have some bumps along the way as a pass protector. And you asked him, like, when we talked to him earlier this summer, like, what do you want to be known for? And he said he wants to be known as the best pass protecting right tackle in the country, I think is what he said verbatim. And like, that's a really high bar. I'm not envisioning him getting there in his first year starting at Ohio State, especially with some of the pass rushers that Ohio State will encounter throughout this year. So I think there will be some moments where you're like, oh boy, that didn't look great. He has to learn on the job a little bit, but I don't think he's going to be awful either. Like there were, I don't know, like Isaiah Prince, right? His first time starting, I think for the majority of that year, he looked like he was way in over his head, just like wasn't ready for it. I'm not envisioning that for Josh Fryar. I think there's going to be more consistent play from him over the course of the season than that. But there probably will be times where you're like, ugh, like he doesn't have it today. It's a tough matchup for him. And he'll have to grow through that. But I also think he's going to be like an awesome run blocker. The combination of Josh Fryar and Matthew Jones on the right side of the offensive line, And like last year they were good too with Juwan Jones and Matthew Jones, especially when Matthew Jones was healthy. So like I'm not trying to say like we haven't seen that before, but I think it has a chance to be maybe as good as we've seen it here. I think both those guys are like heavy-handed, move really well, stick on blocks, strong in the lower half, can really move people. And I think that will help make up for what will probably be some growing pains as a pass blocker as Josh goes throughout the season.
We're not saying that Ryan Day listens to this podcast, but we're not saying he doesn't listen to this podcast. We did 100 minutes on tackles, and then we had a Ryan Day news conference after that where Ryan Day sort of went out of his way to say, Josh Simmons looking great, which felt like, Doug, hey, relax. Josh Simmons is going to be good. And then he also was like, yeah, Josh Fryar's there, but also Luke Montgomery, which sort of felt like, Landis, why don't you chill on Josh Fryar a little bit? We don't know if he listened. But when he said that, like, if Luke Montgomery is the starting right tackle by the middle of the season, then you're not right.
Oh,
We accept that.
For sure.
Like when you heard Ryan, what did you get any read off the way Ryan Day talked about right tackle the last time he talked about right tackle?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Austin made this point when we were talking on the Daily earlier this week that perhaps that was an instance of like Josh Simmons needs that affirmation and Josh Fryar needs that challenge. Just sort of like that's their mental makeup. So he's pushing the right buttons with both those guys. I don't know that I heard that and felt like, oh boy, like Josh Fryar's job is in jeopardy from the jump. Yeah. I like Luke Montgomery quite a bit. I do believe he's going to play more than a typical freshman offensive lineman plays in their first year. He'll probably burn his red shirt this year. Which they don't really do with young offensive linemen in this program. So like I'll buy all the Luke Montgomery stock you can give me. I think he's a starter somewhere next year. But I don't know that Josh Fryar is necessarily looking over his shoulder, like actually like in reality looking over his shoulder. But I do think they want to make sure that he kind of feels that heat to try to get the best out of him.
So part of this is you anticipating more than the expectations. What do you think the expectations are? What do you think fans are thinking about Josh Fryar right now? Maybe in part because they listened to a 100-minute tackle podcast where I was screaming in a high voice the whole time.
Up until maybe like a week or two ago, I would have assumed that they would have had more confidence in Josh Fryar than they did Josh Simmons. But I do think the presence of like shiny borderline 5-star Luke Montgomery does complicate that a little bit, especially if we're to believe that it is that distinct that Luke is like a backup right tackle and is going to be the number 2 behind Josh Fryar and not necessarily someone they'd play at left tackle if it ever came to that. I don't know if that's true. I think he's probably flexible, but any time that there is a guy that highly rated who we've never seen before and all it is projection and your, most grandiose hopes and dreams about a player, I do think that then that creates a little bit of doubt in the guy that's ahead of him, just sort of naturally. So there might be some of that with Josh Fryar, but I would imagine that probably the majority of the fan base thinks that he'll be like, okay. I think he can be something a little bit more than that. And that'll take some time, I think. And like I said, maybe I don't know, maybe the Indiana game. Maybe it's the Indiana game. You see enough to give you a little bit of concern, but I think he's going to grow into being, what's the right way to put it? Probably
the Myles Garrett of right tackles.
The Myles Garrett of right tackles. Yeah. No, like just like better than okay. Like maybe not great, not excellent, but like good. Like, yeah. As good probably as any first year starter we've seen at right tackle, and probably better than most we've seen, at least in my time covering the team, which goes back about a decade now.
Okay. All right. We have Kenyatta Jackson and Josh Fryar in the house. After this break, we'll be back with Austin Ward and Jeremy Birmingham. Who do they believe in? We'll find out next after this. Doug Lesmerises back with Bill Landis and now joined by Jeremy Birmingham and Austin Ward. We'll be getting the guys they are banking on next, but 2 pieces of business we need to cover. First of all, Birm, we're going to do a live show on Monday, August 28th at Land-Grant Brewing, and you're in charge of the cords.
Yeah, I'm often known as the cord guy. It's one of the cards I carry. I'm a card carrying cord guy. And I'm just really excited, Doug, to do this show with you because it's the first time we've co-potted. And then Monday doing it in person is just it's just a dream come true, just to talk about all things Ohio State football, and to do that while drinking beer, which is really, the ideal way to talk about football.
Just don't.
I'm the beer guy.
For real. Austin's like, how dare.
I'm the card carrying beer guy. That's me.
Don't drink too much beer before you plug the cords in. After that, you're good to go.
Austin, I'll keep that order of business.
Cords before beer. Austin, you go to Land-Grant Brewing. You watch cricket. You watch rugby. You watch all kind of international sports there. It's a great place for us to do a live show.
It's the best. I watch that. We've really been going a lot, my family, for the Sunday morning F1 races. I've actually never watched a full cricket match. I do go. We started going there for soccer games with American Outlaws and Crew Union a long time ago for watch parties. People at Land-Grant have always done a great job bringing sports fans together, and I think that this is another opportunity for them to do so, and for us to help coordinate that with Ohio State fans. I'm really looking forward to Monday night. As my wife pointed out, that would be potentially 2 days in a row for us, but who cares? As a card-carrying beer guy, that's fine with me.
How much of cricket matches have you watched if you've never watched a complete cricket match there?
I've never watched any cricket. I don't. They take like 25 hours or something. I don't know. I don't know anything about cricket.
And we also don't know the word for the portions of cricket matches. I've watched 6
wickets.
That's probably right. I haven't watched all 100 wickets. So we have this show up starting around 6:30. We're going to be doing the live show, a live season preview. It'll be the 4 of us plus Zach Boren. 7 to 8:30. We'll be hanging out starting around 6:30. We'll hang out post show till about 9:30. There'll be Mikey's Late Night Slice will be there, so you can eat some pizza. They'll have their usual beer. They'll have some special beers. It's going to be a great time. We would love to see you out there. 420 West Town Street in Columbus. There's a parking garage like 2 blocks away. You can park there, walk on over. We hope to see you Monday, August 28th. Show will start at 7. But we have this show to do, Austin, and we're picking the Buckeyes that we are, more excited than usual about. When I did this at my previous stop, we called it driving the bus for a guy. I'm trying, are you flying the blimp? Maybe? We can't take row the boat, or PJ Fleck will sue us. We were talking about various ways to describe our excitement, or the fact that we are sort of leading the charge for a player. Birm called it Buckeyes we're banking on. Do we have an actual name for this, Austin?
Not yet. Birm actually came up with a different term for it that we definitely shouldn't use, so we shouldn't even touch on that one. I'm just going to be caddying for my selection. I'll stick with a golf theme. So, and I'm going to be
the bag.
I'm carrying the bag. That's right.
Now that sounds
I'm
like
the bag man. Who cares? We'll put it together with the gambling show and NIL. I am going to be the bag man.
Name the Buckeye that you are paying $5,000 to this year. That's who we're choosing here. Birm, banking on a Buckeye. That's what you put in the title.
Yeah, I just am a huge fan of alliteration, and as Austin alluded to, my other alliterative choice perhaps was not appropriate for this.
Bobby Carpenter
venue.
Would have loved it.
Yeah, Bobby Carpenter would have been all in on it, and he's not on this show, and so I felt like it was safer to just go this route.
I was like, we definitely can't talk about the thing we talked about before. Then you guys are like, we're going to tell you what it is, but we're not going to tell you what it is. You guys keep it loose on pods. This is good. This is good for me to know this. Let's talk about the actual players. Austin Ward, who is the Buckeye that you are expecting even more from than the average person?
I think that I am much higher on Joe Royer this year than the average person, average fan, average media member. I don't know, probably just about everybody other than Keenan Bailey, if we're going to be honest about it. I have a trivia question for you three. Do you know the last season that Ohio State had 2 tight ends finish the year with double-digit receptions?
It wasn't a Ruckert Farrell year?
It was not. I thought they might get close. And in 2020, if you did the per game, they might Luke Farrell might have got close, but he would have probably been 1 short.
I'm gonna guess it was Hireman and Van Nett. So I'm going to say 2014, but I could easily be persuaded that it was 2013.
No,
I think it was that combination.
Your first instinct was correct. 2014 was the year, 19 for Nick Vannett and 17 for Jeff Hireman. There were a couple close calls, as Doug mentioned there. The COVID year, Luke Farrell had 5. Maybe if you doubled that up, they wouldn't have played 16 games, but he could have got close. But it was interesting to me. So I looked at that over the last 10, 15 years in 2 tight end usage, because I think Bill and I have had this conversation a lot with 12 personnel. Ryan Day wants to use it more. Could it be a third of the offense, 30%? I think it probably will be, and it does tie into a lot of other things that we've mentioned, which is how will that offensive line play work out? Do you need to have an extra tight end to assist with that? What is the benefit of that for a new quarterback? And the other part that I thought was really intriguing was when you looked at Ruckert and Farrell, Justin Fields did not use both of them that much as a passing target. The last couple of years, that usage in the passing game went up dramatically with CJ Stroud. And even if it wasn't both of them, you're talking about 31 catches for the combination of Jeremy Ruckert and Cade Stover 2 years ago, and then 36 catches for Cade Stover alone. The next closest was G. Scott there with 5. It's like, that's more than what we were talking about in these other years where, Farrell and Ruckert, that was 18 catches over 8 games in 2020. It was 21 catches combined for them the year before in 2019. That's not a lot, even though they were on the field a lot. They were used more as those blockers, and Justin Fields didn't use them as targets. I think that will probably be different for whoever wins the starting quarterback job in this iteration of the offense. And I think that Joe Royer has a really high ceiling. I know that the coaching staff believes in that. We've talked a lot about the difficulties on and off the field for him a year ago. I think he's in a good place mentally, and I think physically he looks like an NFL tight end. And both of those things are trending along with the system and the new quarterbacks, I think, to be an uptick in production. Doesn't even have to necessarily come at the expense of Cade Stover. I think they can coexist and thrive together.
Bill, when you think about a prediction like that, how much of it coming true do you think is stylistic, what the quarterback needs, what the offensive line needs, how much they just want to run 12 personnel, and how much of it is it tied to Joe Royer's individual talent? And again, he obviously had a very difficult year last year, him just being in a place where he has a chance to be more productive.
Yeah, I mean, it's all of that. I do think that I think they'll want to probably get the ball out a little quicker, especially earlier on. So that probably favors the tight ends. If they're going to be lined up in the slot or in line closer to the quarterback, I think that favors them with a younger quarterback. I think it's not necessarily throwing the ball over the middle of the field, because I actually think that is probably less likely to happen with a young quarterback than it is throwing it outside. But if it's quick stuff to guys closer to you, then I think that the tight ends can maybe see a little bit of an uptick in targets. And the thing about Joe Royer is, like, I think we've mentioned this before, like, he and G. Scott are both former high school receivers for all intents and purposes, but Joe does not get talked about in a similar fashion. I do think there's something with him that gives you a little more explosiveness and potential as a receiver than what Ohio State has had in the past, perhaps even better than Jeremy Ruckert, who was not a tremendous downfield target either. There are a lot of mouths to feed, right? They're not going to pepper Joe Royer with 5 downfield shots a game, but I do think he is a tight end who is positioned to give them a little bit more of a vertical threat than they've had there too, which might increase the frequency with which they send the ball his way.
And especially if you look at Royer compared to Cade Stover athletically, Buckeyes took a lot of shots down the field just over a year ago. And if you can just translate those or transmute those over to Joe Royer on the field, I think you have an opportunity to be a little bit more aggressive. And he doesn't get talked about as much as G. Scott as far as being wide receiver, because G left high school as a 5-star wide receiver prospect. And Joe, of course, was being evaluated and viewed as a tight end down the road like Ruckert was. But you have a much more athletic group than people would expect, I think, aside from Stover being how difficult he is to match up with as an athlete. Royer at 6'5", almost 250 pounds is a different type of matchup than, Ohio State's been able to put out there. Even Farrell and Ruckert, as good as they were, I don't think Jeremy Ruckert had the combination of the skill set that Joe Royer does.
Austin, when we think about the 3 veteran receivers that they have back and the way everyone's talking about Carnell Tate, we know Ryan Day likes 12 personnel. How do you think that factors into the idea of, all right, well, if you go 12, you're taking a receiver off the field in a world where it feels like they have at least 4 that they actually really want to play?
Yeah, in the back of my mind, Doug, is still Kevin Wilson saying over and over, here's the list of targets that, players that you want to have the football in their hands. And how high would Joe Royer be on that list? I don't know, probably not any higher than 5th at best, and maybe 6th or 7th. But I think any more with 75 plays, that could still lead to a fair amount of production and a lot of plays that are in 12 personnel. You don't want to run Marvin Harrison and Meke Buka and Julian Fleming, Treveyon Henderson, or anybody else into the ground with way too many reps in a lot of these and many of these other games. But I think it does all tie in with the offensive line, with some of the versatility they want in the play calling. I think that there's a world where if you're in 12 and Marvin and Mecca are both outside, like that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for Cade Stover or Joe Royer to be matched up in winnable situations against a linebacker or a safety, and really be one-on-one or left alone with teams that are constantly looking over their shoulder to try and find Marvin Harrison. So I think, I don't want to go crazy. I've covered Ohio State long enough to know that saying that the 2 are going to combine for 70 balls is probably nuts and not going to happen. But I think that they are going to be really key cogs in that offense, especially if you are in a world where you have some uncertainty with the quarterback battle and the offensive line, and you're leaning on the rushing attack. Well, the best way to supplement that with the blocking is to put those 2 on the field. And if you're able to spin off some play action and easy throws, easy money, the tight ends off that, I think that's a successful combination. Again, it doesn't mean that becomes the baseline formation for Ohio State. I don't think that's going to happen, but I would be surprised if it doesn't at this point get back to 25 to 30% just because of some of the other, things that they're weighing early on offensively and Ryan Day's overall philosophy.
I felt like that Cade Stover saved the tight end room. I think a lot of people have, like the last couple of years, the way they were talking about tight ends a couple of years ago. When you think about the suspension of Bennett Christian this year, Sam Hart doesn't get talked about a lot. It is really sort of Joe Royer and G. Scott behind Cade Stover, and then the wonder of Jelani Thurman that is not probably going to happen a lot this year. Landis, do you feel like the tight end room is in pretty good shape? Once again, when you hear, Austin talking about Joe Royer this way and what Cade Stover laid down last year and the promise of Jelani Thurman, or what do you think the state of that room is?
I think it's pretty good. I think there's more confidence in just like having more guys who can actually play this year than there were last year, because and they were confident in Mitch Rossi, but I didn't really view him as a tight end because they didn't want to put him in line. It was kind of a specialized role for him. Like guys that they think they can put out there as a lone tight end in 11 personnel. I think that list is longer this year than it was last year, because last year was basically just Cade Stover. I think they believe in Joe Royer that way. And I guess I'll buy the chatter on G. Scott kind of improving to where they view him that way as well. So I think it's a good room. I'm maybe less bullish on the idea of them getting back to like 30% 12 personnel than Austin is, but I think you'll see it more than you saw last year. Like true 12 personnel, not one tight end and a fullback in the backfield that you can call 12 personnel depending on how you view Mitch Rossi. Like I think you're going to see true, like more of the Farrell Ruckert stuff that we saw, but maybe not quite as much as we did back when they were humming in 2019 and 2020.
All right, Joe Royer on the books. Quick break. When we come back, Birm is going to be excited. We'll do that next on Kings of Columbus. All right, back with Birm. He's banking on a Buckeye. It's going to be big. It's going to be bad because he's Birm. You got to pick a guy whose name has a B in it now because you like alliteration. I don't even know who are the guys with B's in their name. Ballard. Jaden Ballard? Is that who
Treveyon Benderson.
Treveyon's gonna be like, why do you guys call me Benderson? It's like, it's the whole thing. So Treveyon Henderson is your guy. Okay.
Yeah, he's my guy. And here's another trivia question for you guys. In 21 career games, how many touches does Treveyon Henderson have? Just give or take. What do you think?
21 career games total.
That's
touches.
catches and carries.
250.
278.
Yeah, 281.
321. understanding that he did not really touch the ball often a year ago, and a lot of the 8 games he played in 2022 were half games because he was hurt. How many touches do you think J.K. Dobbins had in 2019?
Oh, he had more than, well over 300.
321.
324. So
that's awesome.
In 2019, J.K. Dobbins had 324 touches, more touches than Treveyon Henderson has had in his first 2 years. I think that you're going to see a player who is healthy, who is back to his explosive self, and a guy that understands that this is his moment to make sure that people realize he is that guy. And, I think as you look through the numbers and what Treveyon did as a freshman, he had 27 catches as a freshman. J.K. Dobbins had 71 career catches and didn't have more than what Treveyon did a year ago in any one season. So, the Buckeyes were leaning on him pretty heavily as a freshman. Obviously, we saw last year the injuries, the Mayan Williams rising up and maybe becoming a little bit more of the weapon that was right for last year's offense. We've talked about that ad nauseum, and then you throw in just the fact that maybe Treveyon was pressing a little bit, trying to hit the home run every play. He still averaged 5.8 yards a carry a year ago and was still pretty productive when he did play. It just didn't look quite as explosive as you wanted it to. Based on what we saw as a freshman. I really do believe, and I talked about it on the podcast daily on the Stock Report on Thursday morning, like I think that you're looking at a guy who is not going to be splitting carries primarily this year. I think you're talking about Treveyon Henderson being the guy for the Ohio State Buckeyes out of the backfield, and I think he's going to get 75% of the carries. If he is what everyone on the Ohio State coaching staff has said he is, and what they've seen out of him in this fall camp, something is different. The light is on, and I think that people are going to see him not just be the bell cow running back. I think you're going to see him as a Heisman finalist, a top 5 guy in that discussion, and someone who makes his way to New York. I think Ohio State's going to have like 3 Heisman finalists in the top 10, or maybe even top 6, like they did in 2019 when J.K. Dobbins was running wild. But I'm extremely high on what Treveyon Henderson can bring when he's healthy.
Do you think they'll throw it to him, Birm?
I think you have to. I mean, it goes back to what you guys were just talking about. The reality is when you have a new quarterback, whether that's Devin Brown or Kyle McCord, whoever it is, the ball will stay closer to the line of scrimmage. The ball will stay closer to the quarterback more so than it did a year ago when you had C.J. Stroud just chucking it down the field. So you are going to rely on him, and he's a very, very good pass catcher out of the backfield. So whatever opportunities you can have to give yourself an advantage in the passing game by relying on his skill set, I think you need to take it. He's the best receiver out of the backfield that the Buckeyes have, and you should use it. I said 27 catches as a freshman, averaged over 11 yards a catch, and had 4 receiving touchdowns. I mean, if you can get that sort of productivity out of him this year, it changes the entire offense. And I've said it a lot in the last few weeks on the podcast daily or Snap Judgments. I think that Treveyon Henderson is single-handedly the difference maker between Ohio State winning a national championship this year or not.
I think at times they almost forgot to throw him the ball last year. And also CJ didn't like to check it down. So he didn't get any of those extra. CJ wanted to read the defense, take a shot. I don't want to give up and throw it to the running back. Austin, are you banking with Birm on this one?
Yeah, I think that Birm is right. One of because I'm not a coach, the evaluations of guys, I can tell who's physically gifted, and we can all do that, by watching practice, watching games. One thing that I really like to do in getting a pulse for guys is the way that they smile, right? The way that they talk about the game, their relationship with their coach. And I've used the example a lot of Mike Weber and J.K. Dobbins when they were going through their back and forth and their struggles. And J.K. was so talented as a sophomore, and it wasn't connecting. And I did a lot of, stories with him and Tony Alford and some behind the scenes stuff about their relationship. And I see that similarity continuing with Treveyon Henderson. Tony Alford is not afraid to coach Treveyon Henderson hard and get on him because he knows that he can take it, that he is willing to put in the work to fix it and get better. And then, he is smart enough to understand what has gone wrong, what Treveyon Henderson needs to do, to make sure that his mental health is in the right spot, his mentality to the game is in the right place. And I see such a dramatic difference in Treveyon Henderson right now, or in spring ball, coming off the field, talking to him in camps, all that stuff over the summer. And that's the part that's exciting. I don't think you can fake that part. The exuberance for the game or the confidence in yourself that you can deliver, I think that that's maybe one area that, you have to pay more close attention to if you're going to get a vibe and a feel for somebody to take that next step. And I don't think most people are able to put on a fake smile, fake confidence when it comes to that. And so when you see Trey run off the field, when you see him jump into drills in March before he's supposed to be cleared, that stuff sticks in the back of my brain. And I've had enough conversations with him over the last 6 months that makes me think that Birm is going to be right without having watched a ton of what he's doing in camp this month. Just a lot of secondhand, word of mouth. That's encouraging, but everything else I think lines up and points to him having momentum going into the season. And as long as he stays healthy, he's going to be really dangerous.
Landis, even if he has that momentum, it's a crowded room, right?
Yeah.
Mayan Williams, Dallin Hayden, maybe a little Chip Trainum, Evan Pryor healthy again. I think Birm said like 75% of the load. And I think that's like the 75% when it matters. They're going to get Dallin Hayden and Evan Pryor the ball in the second half of games when they're in blowouts and that kind of thing. Do you believe that part of it? Because again, part of this is opportunity. To be a Heisman finalist, they have to feed this guy. He could be super talented and healthy and in a good headspace, but if they're splitting carries, he's not going to get to New York. How do you think they will work out the load in the backfield, Landis?
I think you put a good kind of caveat or a qualifier on it there with meaningful. I probably am with Birm on the idea of Treveyon getting the majority of the meaningful running back touches, but I also think he is viewed as such an X factor that they're going to want to make sure that he's available for the most important touches. And they're going to take advantage of the running back room depth to do that. So I think he's going to have a tremendous bounce back season. If anyone is soured on his abilities because of last year, I think they're going to be proven wrong. But I don't think he's going to be really in that Heisman conversation because I just don't think he's going to have the workload volume to get himself there, only because they're going to want to protect him as best they can and make sure they have him available for the biggest games late in the year, Michigan, playoff, national championship, where he can be the difference between winning those games and losing them, as Birm said.
Yeah, and that's clearly the difference between 2019 and now. I mean, 2019, you had J.K. Dobbins at tailback. You had Master Teague behind him. You had a little bit of Marcus Crowley, and that was it. And now you have 5 deep. That is a big difference. But I think that the talent gap between Treveyon Henderson and the other 4 running backs is so wide that if he's healthy, and I think that's the thing that people look at last year and they see a kid who was a little bit reluctant to hit holes as hard as he would have the year before, or maybe his vision looked a little off. I think the fact of the matter is no one really realized that the kid's foot was broken the entire season and kept playing on it. Now, should he have been playing on it? That's a totally different discussion. Are there people in the Ohio State medical department that probably should have been accounting for that? Probably, but sometimes
Austin's
it's hard to
nodding, by the way, for the podcast.
Sometimes it's hard to keep kids
nodding
off the field. And in 2018, the second year of J.K. Dobbins, he averaged 4.6 yards a carry in 14 games, and it ran for just over 1,000 yards. It's still a pretty good year by normal running back standards. But then you look back to what J.K. did as a freshman, you look to what J.K. did as a junior. It was clear that there was a mental hurdle that he was trying to get over, and that's why Austin has brought up that point so many times. In the bad year for Treveyon Henderson, with a broken foot, with the offense being a little bit disjointed at times, with Mayan Williams rising up and taking a lot of his carries, he still averaged 5.8 yards a carry and still had almost 600 yards rushing in those 8 games when he really shouldn't have been playing at all. I just think that, time allows us the opportunity to look back and maybe review things from a different lens. And I think that the fact of the matter is, the fact that Treveyon played at all is sort of crazy when you look back at what he was dealing with a year ago. So
he should not have. And that's one of my biggest problems with the way that the whole thing was handled a year ago. Treveyon was put in an untenable position. People were, I was one of the people that said, I think Mayan Williams at this time is a better fit for the offense a year ago. I talked about the vision. I talked about the other things, and I knew he was hurt, but I didn't know the full severity of the injury. So the fact that Ohio State kept some of that hidden, or all of it, the fact that they continue to put him out there, the Maryland game being the prime example of that, where he could, once that shot wore off after the early touchdown, he could barely walk. That was malpractice. It was criminal what was being done to Treveyon Henderson. That led to criticism from the outside, criticism from people like me, and that changed some of the context for why he may have struggled a month ago. And all of that part of it played into the mentality. He was turning off the mentions on social media, like, because people were questioning his toughness, even though he was playing through a broken foot. It was absolutely nonsensical the way that played out. And once you put all of that behind you, you accept the hard coaching, you accept that you may have done some things wrong when you were healthy enough to play, then you get your body right and you move on to a year 3 and another year of maturity and all those other things. Like, that's, I think, what points to Birm's confidence in him and why I think he's right about that.
I'm not as far there as you guys are. I do think I was a very, very late to the party on Mayan Williams, but I think what Mayan Williams gave them last year, I still think he could be a security blanket at times for this team. Like, when it gets a little rough, you kind of know what Mayan is. The ceiling's not there, but I wonder if there'll be circumstances where it's like, let's play Mayan for a big chunk of the second and third quarters and like let Marv and Emeka make the big plays. And we just want to move the chains in the run game kind of thing. I know Landis thinks the run game is going to be really good this year. If they don't have 5 running back injuries, it'll be better than last year. I mean, we can't go by last year because that room was impossible to try to manage. And Tony Alford did a good job, turning to a linebacker in the Michigan game at running back who actually played pretty well then. I have, I think, a few more questions about the run game in general tied to the offensive line. But Landis, it feels like, if the argument of you get a healthy Treveyon, because we saw what he was as a freshman. He has all this experience. He's healthy. And if you think the offensive line is going to be pretty good, I mean, that is a pretty strong argument.
Yeah, I think they're going to be a good run blocking line almost from the jump. Like, the only guy I guess I question a little bit in that regard is Carson Hinsman and like play strength and whether or not it's going to be in the place that it needs to be. Otherwise, I think they're going to be pretty good run blocking. And I think that is a distinction between whatever this looks like in 2018 when JK and Mike Weber struggled to kind of share the load a little bit. That was not a good run blocking offensive line. Greg Shadaro was like complaining every week about, how am I supposed to get my guys to run block when I don't know how to coach RPOs? Like, I don't think that's going to happen with this offensive line. I think they're going to be able to do both. They struggled to do both a little bit last year at times. I think that was maybe health issues more than anything else, especially on the interior. So provided they're healthy up front too, like I think that the pieces will come together for them to have an effective rushing attack and one that they're going to have to lean on early. And I do believe that Treveyon will be the guy spearheading that.
Treveyon had 1,560 yards, 7.5 yards a carry, and 19 touchdowns as a freshman on an offense that was starting a first-time quarterback and didn't do nearly enough relying on the running back or the running game. Ryan Day has said over and over in these last few weeks, like, he thinks that they need to be taking some more off of the quarterback's plate. And when you take that off the quarterback's plate, it goes to the running backs, and he's the best one on the team.
So to put a fine point on it, Birm, you were talking about the idea of maybe 3 Heisman candidates in the top 6. What do you want to put on this to be right? Be like, Birm nailed it. What a genius that guy is. Treveyon, is there a number of touchdowns, a number of yards from scrimmage, all Big Ten, all American? What are we talking?
Let's say 1,700 scrimmage yards and 20 touchdowns.
Oh, no, that would do it.
Oh, that's it.
I'm glad I didn't have to do this for Joe Royer.
There you go. 1,700 scrimmage yards and 20
46
touchdowns.
catches and 892 receiving yards for Joe Royer. Let's throw that in there for Austin. Okay. I think that is above and beyond. I mean, that's an All-American quality year. That's like a first-round NFL draft pick potentially.
You know what else? No one's asking him about his stocks this year. No one's asking him about his real estate portfolio. I think it's a kid that has refocused and is dialed in. And when you realize that your entire life, that everything you've worked for is right in front of you, and you watch how close you were to having that taken away a year ago, and all this doubt that's coming in from people that didn't understand at all what you were dealing with, I think that's a really powerful motivator. And I think we see it every time Treveyon walks off the field, not to get too metaphysical, like Austin was talking about smiling and all that. Like, there is a different look in this kid's eye, and there is a different attitude about him. And I think he's going to run through and around and by a lot of people this year.
Jeremy Birmingham and Austin Ward, thanks to you guys for joining us here on Kings of Columbus. We'll see you at the live show on Monday at Land-Grant Brewing in Columbus. starting at 6:30 to hang out and starting at 7 to talk. And also, if people want to go see Austin on Sunday morning, he'll be there watching the F1 race.
Cheers to everybody. See you in the beer garden.
We'll see you guys out there. Birm and Austin, thanks for stopping by. Bill and I will be back with Whatcha Watchin, Whatcha Eatin, Whatcha Thinkin next on Kings of Columbus. Back on Kings of Columbus, it's Whatcha Watchin, Whatcha Eatin, Whatcha Thinkin. So Whatcha Eatin, Landis? We'll start there.
Have you had Dave's Hot Chicken? Are you familiar with the establishment? Is it
a I think there's one coming near my house, but I haven't been there yet. Is there a great difference between hot chicken establishments, or if it's hot, is it hot?
No, I think there's a difference. I think the people who like people in Nashville will probably tell you there's a big difference between like Prince's and Hattie B's and stuff like that. And like I don't think Dave's is quite as good as Hot Chicken Takeover, but and they seem to do less. It's a more limited menu. But anyway, the reason I bring it up is because I went there earlier this week, let's just say. And so their menu is like you can get a slider or you can get a tender, and like that's kind of it. And it's like different variations of that. So I ordered 2 sliders. First of all, they're about the size of my head.
Oh,
it's not a slider.
Not a slider.
Not a slider. It's a full-on sandwich. And the tenders are like 4 times the size of the bread. So they're just like sticking. You ever have like the pork loin sandwich, or like seen them like in Indiana? It's like a thing there where like it's the little circular bun, and then the circumference of the pork loin that's in it is like 4 times the size of the bun.
Yeah.
This is a similar deal with the sliders at Dave's. Like they taste fine, but they are unwieldy. And I don't like an unwieldy sandwich. I love a sandwich.
You don't like an unwieldy sandwich.
No, I don't
you want it to be wielded.
Yeah, I don't want it to fall apart as I'm eating it. I want the pieces to be cohesive.
Interesting.
Yeah, like proper bread to meat ratio, and this is not it, which is a shame because I felt like it impacts the experience. I think the flavors are very good. Spicy chicken tender, cheese, their house sauce, whatever it is good. It's a little sweet. Coleslaw, pickles, like the combination of flavors is tremendous. The presentation is lacking, and the experience of trying to keep it all together while you're eating it is quite difficult.
This is also, people need to understand that this is a pro bread podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think a lot of times, right, when you have the meat hanging out of the bread, it implies value, because bread is cheap and meat is expensive. Because, meat is dead animals, and that's more expensive than, I don't know what, flour, and you put it in the oven. So like that idea of look at all this meat, but you as a pro bread guy, you're saying, listen, bread is a meat holder. I want the bread to taste good, but I also want to do its job of holding the meat. I don't want the meat falling out all over the place. What did you do? How did you actually wield the sandwich? Could you eat the sandwich, or did you have to like put part of it down and use a knife and fork?
So I ended up like basically breaking pieces of the tender off.
Yeah.
So that would all more or less fit within the circumference of the bun. It also too, like, I think it could be a different bun. Like I don't like when people fail to consider the integrity of the bread when they're making a sandwich. Like when you put a tender and cheese and a sauce and coleslaw and pickles on something, it tends to get a bit soggy. And this was not a bun that had a lot of structural integrity to it. It was already a soft bun, and then it's going to fall apart if you let it sit there. So take into consideration the structural integrity of your bread when building a sandwich. It's very important.
There are times when you talk and I think that you're wasting your life by not running a sandwich shop.
I would love to own one.
When you start talking about structural integrity of bread, I think, why are you on a football show? What are you doing? Okay. Put that for retirement.
Yeah.
Put that for retirement. Okay. So structural integrity of bread, that's a good lesson. The thing I'm wondering about in terms of what I'm eating is how many times per week should a person eat bacon? Because we always have bacon in our house and it's always an option for breakfast, but I don't let myself eat bacon for breakfast every day. I try to limit it maybe to 2 days out of 7. I'm not saying I always succeed in that, because then if I'm not eating bacon, I'm eating oatmeal and fruit, and that's better for me. But I don't know if I should be limiting myself, or if there are people listening to this who are saying, I eat bacon like once every 2 months as a treat, and if you eat it more than that, you're just trying to clog up your heart. What are you doing? What is the appropriate amount of bacon?
I don't buy it, because if it's in the house, I'm going to eat it. So I think the answer is probably once or twice a week. And if you're doing it any more than that, you're asking for trouble. It's so good. Like how could you not eat it? If it's available to you, how do you not eat it?
So I don't not eat it. But we get like the big Costco pack. It's like 8 packages of bacon, and then we have it sitting in the freezer. And then it's like, okay, well, we ate that pack. Here comes another pack. I don't know. It's very difficult, but it is me exerting discipline. And maybe if you guys want to let us know on Twitter, you can email me at dlamerise@gmail.com and just say, let it rip on bacon. It's okay. Sometimes you read studies, right? You read studies about coffee. It's like, don't drink. Maybe there's a do eat bacon study out there that I have not been part of, but my inclination is 3 times, 4 times a week for a 50-year-old man is not the way to go. So I'm trying to limit it to 2, but you limit it by not having it.
I limit it by not buying it. Yeah. Usually if I'm eating bacon, it's because like we went out to breakfast somewhere, which does not happen a whole lot because breakfast is my favorite meal to cook. So I typically make it for myself.
Because bacon out to eat is very expensive. Bacon at home is much, much cheaper. Like I don't want to get bacon out because it's like, 3 strips of bacon are $4.50. And it's like, you get a whole package. You get 20 strips for $4.50.
Yep.
All right. If anyone out there wants to grant me more bacon permission, please let me know. Or maybe you should just save me from myself and tell me once a month, Doug. Landis, what you watching?
So I've knocked out 3 of the 4 episodes of Swamp Kings, the Florida Gators documentary on Netflix.
We are going to talk about it? Okay.
Yeah. Have you watched it?
No, I'm like, I'm purposefully not watching it because I feel like it would lead me down too many roads of, what did it mean? How should I think about this? How should I think about Ohio State? I'm almost at the place like with the Urban Meyer tenure at both places in terms of like they existed. I think we have a handle on how they existed for good and for bad. And I don't necessarily want to revisit them. Why did you revisit it?
I don't know that I really felt the need to revisit it until like our good pal Ari Wasserman, I think, got some screener copies of it because he's fancy. And said like, this is awful. And then everyone on Twitter was like, this is really bad. So I was like, okay, I got to see why people are saying this. So that's why I watched it. And they were right. Like, I'll say this, like, if you're, and this probably doesn't apply to really anybody listening to this, but if you're like a casual fan of college football, not in the mud every day and like blissfully unaware of the seedier side of college football and just want to watch like crazy dudes working out in the weight room and then like pummeling people on the football field and pretending like none of the other stuff ever happened, it's probably fairly compelling as a watch. If you're not that person and you are aware of everything else that happened and you just sit there on your couch watching it, thinking to yourself, like, why are you not talking about the other stuff? Then it is frustrating. And I'm not saying that because like, I guess it's okay to have something that doesn't like really get their hands in the dirt when you're doing something like that. But I just felt like it was such an important part of the story, especially at Florida, to just like gloss over it. Like it's mentioned, the worst stuff's not mentioned. It's like, oh yeah, Aaron Hernandez, he went to school here. And then I was like, moving on. Like, and like, it's just odd. Like it felt like, I guess in hindsight, it shouldn't be surprising because Urban was involved in it. But it just sort of felt like he directed it. It's like, if Urban Meyer made a documentary about the Florida Gators, what would it look like? And the answer is this.
Now, do you want me to think and talk about it now? Or can I just nod and be like, yeah, Swamp Kings, I guess I won't watch it. It wasn't comprehensive. Or do I now have to have an opinion on it? Because you decide.
You do not have to have an opinion on it if you don't want to.
Okay. I think I'm not going to have an opinion on it.
Okay.
Because it's undeniable. And then the thing that I thought that happened at Ohio State for most of the tenure at Ohio State was like all the things that they're not talking about in the Swamp Kings documentary, like didn't happen at Ohio State.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And like maybe he learned his lessons and the type of players they brought in and just took care of their business and didn't have the off-field thing. And then there was an off-field thing at the end, but it wasn't player related, right? I mean, I thought so. Actually, I think if you did, although I did notice like Tyvis Powell was tweeting about it, and then Jake Stoneburner said, like, I think I'm having like flashbacks. Like these guys, the part of it that is Urban grinding players and demanding the best out of them. That was relatable to the players who lived through it. We could have Zach on here, and I'm sure he's watching it being like, well, yeah, what do you mean? Like, that was my life. But then the other part is, well, that's how they went 12-0 his first year, and they won the national championship his third year, so I think we know that, but like that part of it. So let's briefly dispatch with the fact that they ignored all the off-field stuff. What did you think of I am a demanding football coach who brings out the best in the accomplishment of my teams, but maybe really makes life tough on the players at time, and all the stuff that Urban says about, I feed steak to the winners and I feed hot dogs to the losers kind of stuff, which he's very upfront about and has been his whole career. How is that covered in there?
Yeah, I think mostly fairly. Like they don't shy away from any of that. It is what made Urban great. Whatever you think of the method, like that's what made him a national championship winning coach. Though what they did not offer, I'm sure there were players at Florida and players at Ohio State who didn't love that method of trying to get the best out of people. And I don't know, maybe if that was explored enough. It was explored a little bit with like Brandon Spikes was like, I got here and like I hated this stuff. By the time my career ended, I learned to love it, and that's how we won the second national title. So it was handled probably appropriately, and that was like, that was the secret sauce that made them so good. So to embrace that and talk mostly about that, I don't think is wrong. But it was mostly like a glorification project for Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow, who are two very accomplished men in the sport of college football. But it was pretty heavy-handed in a way that I just found like maybe just not interesting, not necessarily wrong, but just not super interesting. Partly because like I have been close to it and like I knew all that stuff already. So if you're someone who was not, and again, maybe that doesn't apply to Ohio State fans because they live through it. It probably is more compelling than I'm making it seem, but it was a lot of rehash and not necessarily anything new or intriguing.
It's one of those things where if you are diving into a sports documentary or writing a sports book, if you're not going to be truthful all the way around, good or bad, you can't do it. Like you just like, why would you? What is the point of it? So like, why Netflix would do it? Like, why are you doing it? What are you trying to serve? You're just better off not doing it. Like, let somebody who's willing to tell the 360 picture tell the story, which again is something that I think I've talked about a lot. It's like, you think like, maybe this would be a good book. And it's like, well, can you get to the truth? And if you can't, then you can't do it. Because otherwise Bill Landis comes on and says like, I don't know, it wasn't very good. Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about subtitles because I saw this come across my Twitter feed. And I think it was a story actually a couple weeks ago that a magazine wrote, but that like, the younger generation likes subtitles on their shows. They like using subtitles, and I watch everything with subtitles, and it made me feel young and hip instead of old and feeble, which is what I normally feel when I use subtitles. I watch subtitles on like everything, and I think part of it is sometimes when you're watching like maybe something that a director was trying to be artistic, and it's like, why didn't you have the actor speak toward the camera? Or why is it so dark? Or why, like, and I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. I love subtitles, and it made me feel not seen. Well, no, seen. Yeah. Made me feel seen. I saw the subtitles. Made me feel seen that other people enjoy subtitles when they're watching movies and dramatic shows. I don't need subtitles for like a How I Met Your Mother rerun.
Right.
But if I'm watching like a heavy show or a movie and like that stuff is happening and it's not just explosions, it's like the dialogue that matters. I love subtitles. Do you like subtitles?
I've grown to appreciate them. I probably found them more intrusive than anything else prior to a couple of years ago. And I feel like my attention span's gotten worse as I've gotten older. So maybe that's part of it. But I also like to your point, when I watch things, and I feel like I've watched more of this as I've gotten older, maybe that's just the natural way of things, like where the dialogue is just like much more important. And it's a dialogue driven show. Without the subtitles, I think you can tend to just kind of zone out a little bit and like it loses your attention, and that helps draw me back in or helps keep me locked in. And then there's just some shows where I think like the sound is bad and I can't hear what they're saying. Like Game of Thrones, at times I'm watching, I don't know what you're saying. I can't see anything. I can't hear anything. At least give me the subtitles so I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So feel free. Let it rip on subtitles, everybody. The world, apparently everybody's doing it. Yeah. So like Succession, I felt like you had to have subtitles for because it's just talking.
Right.
And the other thing, sometimes you get clues in subtitles because there'll be dialogue that's in the background that I feel like the director is kind of doesn't care if you hear it or not, but the subtitles will give it away and tell you what's going on. And the other thing that I like is when there's just kind of like a buzz of like over people talking over each other, they'll put parentheses indistinct chatter, which is definitely my racehorse name. Love. And it also chatter. Possibly my autobiography, Indistinct Chatter. Yeah. So if you do subtitles, you get to see that in your screen too. What are we thinking about? I'll start because I've been thinking about this and I keep forgetting to bring it up, and I want to have a deep, deep dive on this. I don't think we did it. Did we do it? All the coaches at Big Ten Media Days who weren't wearing socks or socks that you could see, why have we given up on socks?
We didn't do that. No.
Why? Yeah. I understand the sports socks, right? When you're wearing shorts and sneakers. When I was a kid, you wore big, long tube socks that had a stripe on it. I know we don't do that anymore. I wear short socks with my sneakers. But how are we at a place where if you're wearing a suit and dress shoes, we can't see your socks? That's where we are stylistically. Why? Why is that? We're now embarrassed. Ugh, can't believe that guy wore socks. What a jamoke. What are we doing?
So you've never done that? You've never gone with that look?
No, I don't. I enjoy socks. It keeps your shins warm. But also, I have socks that have little designs on them. Sometimes you try to match your shirt to your socks, or your tie to your socks. But certainly, I don't view socks, dress socks with pants. I don't view the presence of socks as embarrassing. And to me, if you're wearing the short socks that it looks like you're wearing no socks, it's because you think socks themselves are embarrassing. And who decide? We're back to that. Who decided that's the style for men, grown men?
I don't know that it's a matter of thinking socks are embarrassing. And one, I would assume that more often than others, people are wearing socks or just no show socks, because you don't want to be walking around with bare feet and dress shoes.
Yeah,
but it's uncomfortable. One, and two, it gets stinky quite quickly. I think it is more a reflection of the style of pants now. Like people are rocking more tapered pants. I think probably getting a little bit shorter of an inseam, so where like your pants aren't baggy at the bottom. They're not coming down past your ankles. So then like that area is exposed. And then it's just a question of, do you want to do something cool with your socks? Like a cool design, something that shows off your personality. And if you don't, like, are you just going to wear a regular old dress sock? I don't think so. I'm not. So, I've done both. To Ari's wedding, I went with a no sock look.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you not risk the no-show sock rolling down a little bit, and then you get a blister on the back of your foot because the shoe is rubbing?
That's happened. Yeah, I think that is a risk. It's happened for me anyway. Maybe there's a secret to that.
But in the name of style, it's a risk you're willing to accept?
Yeah, I think so. I actually think it's a good look. I think we're on different sides of this argument.
No, this is tearing this podcast apart. I am risking nothing when it comes to socks. Nothing. I would pull a sock up to the middle of my thigh if I could. I want full, comfortable coverage. And if it has, I don't know, like a Disney character on it, great. So I don't know. I hope it comes back around and people like you, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying I think you're confused. And I just want your feet to be comfortable.
I think you're confused because I think you're wrong too on the shorts and socks thing. I think like a mid-cut sock is back in style.
That's back?
Yeah.
So like, wait, so now
you're not wearing tube socks that come up to your shins that like you can like unfurl and they come up to your knee and then you just like scrunch them down. We're not wearing those, but yeah, like a mid cut, like kind of a little bit above the ankle, perhaps even to like into your shin area, I think is more the preferred style these days.
For real?
Yeah.
I have not been told that. I need to get on an email list or something. Yeah. So we are okay with longer socks with shorts than with pants.
Yes.
Blows my mind.
The longer the pant, the shorter the sock.
This is the most I've been confused in the last 10 years. There's no part of that makes sense to me. Okay. I don't want to fight. But I have to feel like there are people out there on my side. So this is not over.
Sports writers in their 50s are on your side.
I am who I am. My people are my people. All right. What are you thinking about? I can't believe it. It can't be as much thought as we just put into socks, but what do you think
It's
about?
not. No, mine is rather simple and rather obvious. I'm just thinking about the start of college football season and how excited I am that it is back with week 0 games this week. Some weeks there are, or some week zeros are less interesting than others. This one is not filled with super interesting games, but like get to watch Notre Dame play Navy. I think that's cool. Get to see Caleb Williams play on Saturday night against San Jose State. If you are a person who gets to access Pac-12 network, which is impossible to find. I think like UTEP might be an interesting team to watch if you're into watching G5 football. The Ohio Bobcats play this weekend against San Diego State. If you want to, have a little bit of state pride, if you're in Ohio and watch one of the teams from Ohio play, you can do that. So it's just been a long off season. And I am a person who appreciates college football in all forms. So I'm glad that it's back.
One more thing on socks. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to actually say it. Do you think we'll eventually get to the point where like week 0 is week 1 and we just move up the whole season a week and then you throw in an extra bye for teams in the middle of the year?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to. But the expanded play, I think we're going to get to the expanded playoff and people are like, this is an untenable situation. And we're going to have to move the season up a little bit. Yeah.
Because they don't want to give up games. So you have to adjust the schedule and
Right.
lengthen the schedule because it's not like they're going to cut back from 12 regular season games to 11.
Right.
But to ask a college football team to play 12 out of 13 weeks, go straight into a conference championship game, and then have like 2 weeks or maybe not even a full 2 weeks off before starting a playoff run, you need to provide probably that extra week would be valued. And I think 3 years from now, we'll be on here and week 0 will be week 1. And we'll be talking in late August, like, hey, the season's starting in the last weekend in August instead of the first weekend in September.
Yep.
Okay. That's Kings of Columbus. Next week is game week for Ohio State. I think we might, the schedule might tweak a little bit. We got some stuff planned. Should we tell them the one thing that we're doing, Landis, like the Saturday thing, or should we wait on that?
No, I think we're going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell.
We're doing a post-game show. Landis and I are going to be on Kings of Columbus immediately after the Ohio State game or very, very quickly after the Ohio State game. And we will be immediately recapping it. We will be talking about what else is happening in Northern football that matters, but it is primarily an Ohio State post-game show. And I don't want to go out on a limb, but I will. It's going to be the best post-game show out there. So we are going to immediately react to what's going on. That post-game show will get even better and better and better over the course of the year. But 3:30 kickoff against Indiana next Saturday. And so when it ends at like whatever, 6:52 or something, we'll be on at like 6:54, Landis, right?
Yeah, we'll be live on YouTube is the plan. Me and Doug. Eventually, when I get to the point where we're having Birm and Austin on that show kind of live on location as well, which I think will make for a really compelling post-game show. And then if you're not a live YouTube person, although I think you should be for this particular endeavor, we'll record it and it'll be in your podcast feeds probably the next day, if I had to guess, with all the other stuff we have going on, at least for the time being. But yeah, live after the game in your podcast feeds not too long after that.
And we know people are ravenous for Ohio State discussions as soon as the game ends. And I think it's going to be fun to dive into that right away. So we're not going to be brushing past stuff. We're not going to be talking about cliches. We're going to be diving in and giving you the real truth about this team like we always try to do. And we're going to be doing it immediately after the game ends. So here's what you should, like, if you go to the game or if you're watch it on your phone, but like plug your phone into your radio so you can listen to it, right? So you can watch, you can make your own podcast. It's a live YouTube feed, but if you don't have the opportunity to sit and watch because you're driving or doing something else, just treat it like a podcast and listen to what we're saying as we break down the Buckeyes after they play the Hoosiers to open the season. We'll see a bunch of you out at the live show on Monday at Land-Grant Brewing in Columbus. Starts at 6:30. The actual live show will be from 7 to 8:30. We're excited to see everybody there. And we're so grateful to everybody who's making Kings of Columbus part of their Ohio State and college football fandom. The season is here, and we are ready to roll. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was, thanks, Birm. Thanks, Austin, for jumping on, man. On banking on the Buckeyes or being excited about the Buckeyes. We're still working out the kinks.
Yeah.
It's all good. For Bill, I'm Doug, and that was Kings of Columbus.